Every favor is etched in human memory, and their revenge reshapes worlds. Part 1. The debt we never asked for. Captain Nathan Brooks stood at the observation window of Earth Station Kepler, watching the solar storm approach. The wall of fire moved through space like a living thing, twisting and turning, swallowing everything in its path. Radiation readings climbed higher with each passing hour. The station's instruments screamed warnings that nobody outside wanted to hear. Behind him, Dr. Lisa Morrison worked frantically at her console. Her fingers moved across the holographic displays, running calculations for the third time. The numbers did not change. They never did. The Varth Collective's archaeological site sat directly in the storm's path, and in 48 hours, it would be destroyed. Send the warning again, Nathan said quietly. Lisa looked up, her face tired. She had been awake for 20 hours. I have sent it 5 times already. The Varth Council says our predictions are unreliable. They say our instruments are not advanced enough to measure solar storms accurately. Nathan closed his eyes. This was how it always went with the Varth. They were an ancient species with technology thousands of years ahead of humanity. They had ruled the galaxy for longer than humans had been writing. To them, human warnings were the noise of children playing with broken toys. Send it again, Nathan repeated. The station trembled slightly. Engineer Marcus Hayes burst through the door, his uniform soaked with sweat. Marcus had been working in the reactor core for the past 6 hours, trying to prepare the station for what was coming. Captain, we cannot hold the shields much longer, Marcus said, breathing hard. The storm is accelerating. In 36 hours, the radiation will pierce our hull like a knife through paper. We need to evacuate. Nathan turned from the window. How many people at the Varth site? Our last scan showed 42,000, Marcus replied. Mostly scientists and support workers. No military presence. Nathan nodded slowly. He had known the answer before asking. He had reviewed the scans himself many times. 42,000 souls working on archaeological digs, living in pressurized habitats that were not built to withstand a solar storm. When the radiation wave hit, those habitats would fail. The people inside would die slowly, gasping for air as their shelters fell apart around them. Lisa stood up from her console. The Varth will not evacuate. Councillor Theron sent a response. He said the site is protected by Varth shield technology, and our warnings are based on faulty calculations. He said we should focus on saving ourselves instead of wasting communication bandwidth on false alarms. The words hung in the air like poison. Nathan felt something cold settle in his chest. The Varth had rejected the warning. They believed their own technology could protect them. They were wrong, and they were going to die because of it. 42,000 of them. Call a staff meeting, Nathan said. All department heads, now. 20 minutes later, Nathan sat at the head of the conference table. 8 officers and engineers filled the room. They all knew what was coming. The storm could not be stopped. Their station was too small to weather it. They had 2 options: evacuate and leave the Varth to their fate, or try something else. If we used every power reserve we have, Nathan said slowly, could we project a deflection shield around the Varth site? The room went silent. Marcus was the first to speak. Captain, such a shield would require all of our power generation. We would have nothing left for life support. The station would die. How long could we hold it? Nathan asked. Marcus calculated mentally. 72 hours maybe. Long enough for the storm to pass. But our life support would fail after that. We would all die in here. Not all, Lisa said quietly. We could evacuate the station while maintaining the shield. The crew would have time to reach the lifeboats and launch before the reactors failed. Some of us would make it. Some, Marcus repeated bitterly. Half of us, maybe. The others would be still aboard when the power cuts out. Nathan looked at each face around the table. These were good people. They had families back on Earth. They had lives and dreams and reasons to survive. They had signed up to explore space, not to die for aliens who did not appreciate the warning. Anyone who wants to leave on the evacuation shuttles can go, Nathan said. No judgment. No court-martial. This is not an order. This is a choice. The meeting dissolved into arguments and questions. Some officers wanted to leave immediately. Others wanted to stay. By the time it ended, Nathan knew who he was. He was a man who could not watch 42,000 people die. When he had the power to save them, he sent orders to prepare the station for power diversion. The reactor technicians understood what it meant. They would work faster and harder, pushing the systems beyond safe limits to generate maximum output. They would accomplish something impossible, or they would die trying. Marcus never left the reactor core. He moved through the station's heart like a man possessed, making adjustments that should have taken weeks. He bypassed safety protocols and overclocked systems that were never meant to run at such intensity. The heat in the core climbed to dangerous levels, but Marcus kept working. The deflection shield activated 31 hours later. It spread out across space like a bubble of protection, surrounding the Vareth archaeological site. The shield held, steady and strong, drawing power from Earth Station Kepler, like a parasite draining its host. The solar storm struck with the force of 1,000 suns. The radiation waves hammered at the shield. The Vareth habitats would have disintegrated in seconds without protection. Instead, the shield held. It bended and warped under the assault, but it did not break. Nathan watched from the observation window as his station died around him. The lights in the corridors flickered and dimmed. Life support systems failed one after another. The temperature began to drop. But the shield remained, protecting those 42,000 Vareth who did not know that humans were dying to save them. 72 hours later, the storm passed. The shield faded. The Vareth emerged from their habitats to find their lives intact, their research intact, their world preserved. They sent automated reports back to the Galactic Council, thanking the Vareth shield technology for its incredible performance. Nathan Brooks and 2,000 other humans died that day. They died in the cold dark of a dying station, their life support systems exhausted, their power reserves depleted. They died saving people who did not know they were in danger and would never understand the price that was paid. The Vareth sent a formal thank you letter 3 weeks later, addressed to the human government. They offered a modest amount of credits as compensation and suggested that humans should be more careful when making predictions about stellar phenomena. In the Galactic Council, the incident was filed away as a minor matter. Nobody remembers that humans ever existed at Earth Station Kepler. But the humans who died there remembered everything, and they etched their sacrifice into a memory that would outlive them all. Every favor is etched in human memory, and their revenge reshapes worlds. Part 2. The Favor Forgotten. Galactic Council chambers sat at the center of Axis Prime, a sprawling complex of crystal and metal that had stood for 10,000 years. Councillor Theron entered through the main archway, his forearms moving with practiced grace. He was the leader of the Vareth Collective, a species that had shaped the galaxy through science, trade, and politics. The humans interested him not at all. The meeting had been called to address the loss of Earth Station Kepler. The Vareth had detected the station's power failure and its subsequent destruction. Theron had authorized a formal investigation, which revealed that the human station had somehow projected a protective shield across the Vareth archaeological site during the solar storm. The humans had saved them. Apparently, it was a curious fact, but not a significant one. The Vareth had survived. Their research had been preserved. The means by which this occurred was ultimately irrelevant. Theron took his seat at the Great Council table. Around him sat representatives of the other major species. The Kethran Empire had sent General Carix, his exoskeleton gleaming under the chamber lights. The Valorian Ascendancy had sent their eldest member, an ancient being named Valoris, who had witnessed the rise and fall of 17 galactic civilizations. The Syndicate had sent their usual shadowy representative, someone who preferred to remain unnamed, the human ambassador. Catherine Lee sat at the lower section of the table, a placement that reflected humanity's position in the hierarchy. She was a small woman with dark hair and tired eyes. She had been fighting for human recognition in the Galactic Council for 5 years, and she had learned that most battles could not be won through argument alone. The Varath Collective wishes to thank the human government for their assistance, Theron began, speaking in the formal register used for official business. We acknowledge that human technology somehow contributed to the preservation of our archaeological site. This was unexpected. Catherine leaned forward slightly. Captain Nathan Brooks and his crew made a choice to sacrifice everything they had to save 42,000 Varath lives. They did not have to do this. They chose to do this because they believed it was right. Theron's expression did not change. Yes, they made that choice. This is noted. The Varath Collective will provide financial compensation to the human government in the amount of 500,000 credits. This is a generous gesture, considering that the humans were acting without authorization and took risks that endangered their own station. Catherine wanted to stand up and scream. 500,000 credits would barely cover the funeral expenses for the 2,000 dead. It was nothing. It was an insult wrapped in diplomatic language. With respect, Counselor, Catherine said carefully, Captain Brooks and his crew died saving your people. They died because they believed in the Galactic Council's principle that all life has value. They believed that the Varath were worth dying for. General Carix made a sound like grinding metal. Humans are emotional creatures. They make decisions based on feelings rather than logic. This is not a weakness to be rewarded. It is a characteristic to be managed. Valoris, the ancient Valorian, studied Catherine with something that might have been pity. Ambassador Lee, your species has much to learn about the nature of the galaxy. Sacrifice is made every day. Beings die constantly in pursuit of goals they will never live to see achieved. The Varath did not ask for this sacrifice, nor would they have requested it if they had known the cost. Therefore, their debt to humanity is minimal. Catherine's hands clenched into fists beneath the table. She was being told that the deaths of 2,000 humans meant nothing because the Varath had not asked for the help. The logic was cold and precise and utterly inhuman. I would like to propose, Catherine said, that the Galactic Council pass a resolution recognizing the sacrifice of Earth Station, Kepler, and elevating humanity's standing within the Council. My people have proven their commitment to the principles we all claim to share. Theron consulted with his peers silently, some kind of telepathic communication that humans could never access. After a moment, he turned back to Catherine. The proposal is noted and rejected. The Galactic Council recognizes the contributions of all species. Humans will receive the same recognition as any other emerging civilization, no more and no less. The 500,000 credits offer is final. We suggest that humanity use this payment to develop better warning systems for solar phenomena. Catherine sat back in her chair, defeated. She had nothing more to say. The meeting continued for another hour, discussing trade routes and diplomatic protocols. Nobody mentioned Earth Station Kepler again. It was filed away as a small incident, barely worth remembering. 3 months later, the survivors of Earth Station Kepler began arriving on Earth. They came in small transports, broken and haunted. The radiation exposure had damaged their bodies in ways that medical science could only partially reverse. Many would spend the rest of their lives in pain, their systems slowly failing as the radiation sickness spread through their organs. Captain Nathan Brooks was not among the survivors who made it home. He had stayed aboard until the very end, making sure that everyone who could be evacuated was evacuated. He died alone in the dark, and his body was never recovered. The human population learned what had happened. News broadcasts showed the faces of the survivors, their burns and injuries, their 1,000-yard stares. Videos of Nathan's final messages were released to the public, recordings where he spoke about the choice they had made and why it mattered. Humanity mourned. They mourned the 2,000 dead, and they mourned the knowledge that their grief meant nothing to the galaxy. The Vareth had received their lives back, and in return, they had offered 600,000 credits and a suggestion about better warning systems. In the years that followed, something changed in humanity. It was not obvious at first. It was a subtle shift in how humans viewed the galaxy and their place in it. They had learned a lesson that could not be unlearned. The galaxy did not reward kindness. It took kindness and forgot it. It took sacrifice and moved on to the next crisis without pausing to remember. Nathan Brooks was declared a war hero, but only in human news feeds. The Galactic Council never mentioned him. The Vareth erased the incident from their official histories. General Carrick's made a statement suggesting that humans were too emotionally unstable for military operations. Valora said nothing, which was worse than any statement could have been. His silence meant agreement. Humanity learned to remember. Every human child studied the deaths at Earth Station Kepler in school. Every human citizen knew the names of the 2,000 who died. The incident was carved into human consciousness like letters carved into stone. And beneath that memory, something else grew. It was not anger yet. It was not revenge. It was something deeper and more dangerous. It was a collective understanding that the galaxy did not value human life or human sacrifice. It was the beginning of a truth that would eventually reshape everything. The Vareth continued their archaeological research. The Kethran Empire expanded their borders. The Valorian Ascendancy consulted on matters of cosmic importance. And humanity watched from the shadows, remembering everything, forgetting nothing, waiting for the moment when the galaxy would need them again. Every favor is etched in human memory, and their revenge reshapes worlds. Part 3. The debt comes due 7 years after the destruction of Earth Station Kepler. Secretary General Robert Cole sat in his office on New Terra, reviewing the latest reports from the outer colonies. The Vareth Collective had continued to ignore humanity, treating them as junior partners in the Galactic Council. The Kethran Empire had become more aggressive, pushing their military presence into disputed sectors. Things were changing, but nobody could have predicted how fast. The alert came in at 3 in the morning, Earth time. Every communications officer on the planet received the message simultaneously. It came from Axis Prime, the capital world of the Vareth Collective. The transmission was marked as Priority Level 1, which meant it had to be delivered to the Secretary General within minutes. Robert read the message twice, then a third time. Each reading made the words feel less real. The Ravagers had awakened. An ancient species, buried in hibernation for 200,000 years, had begun activating across a region known as the Broken Sector. They had destroyed 3 Vareth colony worlds already. Millions of Vareth were dead. The Ravagers' weapons technology was beyond anything the Galactic Council had ever encountered. They were advancing toward Axis Prime itself, and the Vareth military was unable to stop them. The message from Counselor Theron was blunt and desperate. They needed military assistance, immediately. The Vareth were requesting that every species within the Galactic Council commit their armed forces to stopping the Ravagers. The very survival of the galaxy was at stake. The final paragraph made Robert's pulse quicken. Theron had specifically requested human military involvement. The Varath Council believed that humans possessed strategic advantages in unconventional warfare. They wanted General Victoria Chun and her strategic team. Robert called an emergency meeting of Earth's leadership. The Joint Chiefs of Staff arrived within an hour. Military commanders from the Pacific Union, the Atlantic Alliance, and the Eastern Coalition gathered in the war room. Secretary General Cole explained the situation. "The Varath are asking for help," Robert said simply. "If we refuse, the Galactic Council will collapse. The Ravagers will eventually reach human territory. We can let them die, or we can fight." General Victoria Chun listened carefully, her face stone. She had been studying the Varath incident for years, training her forces in the kind of adaptive tactics that might have saved Earth Station Kepler. She knew the history of betrayal better than anyone. "If we go," Victoria said slowly, "we go as partners. Not as servants. Not as subordinates. We go knowing that we are equals to the Varath, and we fight for ourselves as much as for them. Because if the Varath fall, we fall next." The council voted. The decision was close, but the vote passed. Humanity would commit its military forces to the defense of the Galactic Council. 20,000 soldiers would be deployed immediately, along with 200 military ships. General Victoria Chun would command the human forces. At the same moment the decision was being made on Earth, the Ravagers struck the outer colonies of the Varath Collective. Entire cities were vaporized. The Varath shield technology that had protected them for thousands of years failed against the Ravagers' ancient weapons. The realization spread through the Varath population like a plague. They were not the most advanced species in the galaxy anymore. They might not even be able to survive what was coming. General Chun's forces launched from Earth within 72 hours. The military ships cut through space at maximum velocity, heading toward the broken sector. The soldiers aboard were young and determined. Many had studied the history of Earth Station Kepler. Many knew that they were being sent to fight for a species that had betrayed humanity in the past, but they went anyway. Victoria had taught them that sacrifice was sometimes necessary, not because it would be rewarded, but because it was right. The galaxy might forget their names. The Varath might dismiss their sacrifices, but humans would remember. That was enough. The first contact with Ravager forces happened on the edge of a system called Catherine 7. The Varath had established a defensive line there, but it was crumbling. Ravager warships descended from above, their weapons tearing through Varath shields like paper. The Varath commander sent out a desperate call for immediate assistance. Victoria received the message and made her decision in seconds. She committed her entire force to the battle, launching human fighters alongside Varath warships. The engagement was fierce and overwhelming. The Ravagers outnumbered them significantly, and their weapons were devastating. But Victoria had anticipated this. She had studied centuries of human military history, learning tactics from ancient wars on Earth. She knew that numbers and technology did not always determine the outcome of battle. Adaptation, strategy, and the will to fight could shift impossible odds. Human ships moved in patterns that the Ravagers could not predict. Varath commanders watched as human pilots pulled maneuvers that should have torn their ships apart, creating openings in the Ravager formation. Human ground teams established defensive positions that held against assault after assault. The Ravagers, accustomed to facing civilizations that fought with pure technological superiority, encountered humans who fought with everything they had, including intelligence and cunning. By the end of the first day, the Ravager advance had slowed. By the end of the first week, the Varath had regained territory. By the end of the first month, the humans and Varath together had stabilized the front line. Councillor Theron received the news and felt something he had not expected to feel: relief. And beneath the relief, a deeper emotion that took him longer to identify. It was something like shame. The humans were dying for the Vareth. Not dramatically or ceremonially, but steadily, battle after battle, losing soldiers and ships and lives. They were doing this with the understanding that they might not be rewarded. They might be forgotten again. But they were doing it anyway, because Victoria Chun had convinced them that principle mattered more than gratitude. Theron sent a personal message to General Chun, asking for a meeting. When they met on a space station near the front lines, the Vareth counselor looked at the human general with new understanding. "Why did your people come?" Theron asked. "After what we did to you after Earth Station Kepler. After the way we treated your sacrifice?" Victoria did not look away. "Because you needed help. Because we could give it. And because humans have learned that the galaxy requires people who will act with honor, even when honor is not repaid. That is who we are now, Counselor. That is who we choose to be." Theron said nothing. He could not explain to this human general that the Vareth had spent 10,000 years believing that sacrifice was weakness, that kindness was foolishness, that only the strong survived. Victoria was teaching him that his civilization had been wrong about these things, and the price of that education was being paid in human blood. Every favor is etched in human memory, and their revenge reshapes worlds. Part 4. The price of Memory. Sergeant William Hayes led his unit through the ruins of a Ravager command center on the planet Axis 7. Dust hung in the air like fog. The bodies of Ravager soldiers lay scattered across the floor, their exoskeletons cracked and broken. William's team had fought for 6 hours straight to take this position, and the battle was not over. "Scan the servers," William ordered, his voice steady despite the exhaustion that pulled at every muscle. "Get me everything about their tactical patterns." The soldiers worked quickly, downloading data from the Ravager computers. This was the kind of work that won wars. Understanding the enemy's plans, predicting their movements, finding the weak points in their defense. Humans excelled at this type of thinking. They had a talent for adaptation that the Ravagers could not match. Colonel Margaret Ross coordinated the larger defensive operations from the command center orbiting Axis Prime. She had 30,000 human troops under her command, spread across 5 different star systems. Every day, she made decisions about where to commit forces, how to respond to Ravager attacks, which Vareth colonies could be abandoned and which had to be held at any cost. The weight of those decisions pressed down on her constantly. She knew how many soldiers would die based on every choice she made. She could calculate it. Hold this position, lose 3,000. Pull back to this line, save 5,000, but lose a city of 1 million Vareth civilians. The mathematics of war were brutal and unforgiving. Margaret had been a military strategist for 25 years, but she had never encountered a situation like this. The Ravagers fought with tactics that were 200,000 years old, strategies that had been perfected across countless wars against civilizations that no longer existed. The Vareth military, despite their advanced technology, had no experience fighting against an enemy of this magnitude. They relied on Margaret and the other human commanders to teach them how to survive. Counselor Theron watched the war reports from his office in Axis Prime. He saw the casualty figures climbing higher with each passing day. Vareth soldiers were dying at unprecedented rates, but they were slowing the Ravager advance. They were buying time. And with time, Victoria Chun was preparing something. 3 months into the conflict, Victoria called a strategic meeting with all allied commanders. Vareth generals, Kethran military advisors, and human officers gathered in a secure chamber. Victoria stood before a holographic display showing the Ravager positions. "The Ravagers are advancing in a linear pattern," Victoria explained, highlighting their movements with the pointer. "They do not adapt. They do not change their strategy based on new information. Their attacks are predictable, because they believe their technology is superior enough that they do not need to change. "How do we exploit this?" asked General Carrix, the Kethrim commander. "We do not fight them head-to-head," Victoria said. "We cannot beat them in direct combat, but we can disrupt their supply lines. We can cut their forces into isolated groups. We can make them fight on terrain where their superior firepower becomes less useful. We can use psychology, deception, and patience." The Varath generals looked uncomfortable with this approach. They preferred direct engagement, where superior technology and force would prevail. But Victoria's strategies had already saved them once, and they were beginning to trust the human general. The campaign lasted 4 months. Human forces infiltrated Ravager positions, gathering intelligence on supply routes and command structures. William Hayes led teams deep into Ravager territory, mapping out their bases and sending back the data that Victoria needed. Each mission was suicide. Each mission had a casualty rate above 50%. William lost friends constantly. He watched soldiers he had trained and fought alongside get vaporized by Ravager weapons. He saw the best people he knew burn and bleed and die in the cold dark of alien worlds. But he kept moving forward. He kept gathering intelligence. He kept fighting because Victoria had given him a purpose. Make it so the next generation of human soldiers would not have to make these sacrifices. Colonel Margaret Ross orchestrated the larger campaign with ruthless precision. When the Ravagers attacked a colony, she calculated whether it could be saved. If it could not, she evacuated the civilians and pulled back her forces to more defensible positions. Thousands of Vera civilians died in those colonies, and Margaret carried the weight of every single one. But she was not killing them. The Ravagers were killing them. Margaret was simply choosing which ones could be saved and which could not. It was a horrible choice, but it was the only choice that mattered in a war of survival. After 6 months of fighting, the human strategy began to work. The Ravager forces were cut off from their supply lines. Their weapons began to malfunction from lack of maintenance. Their armies became isolated and vulnerable. The Varath and their human allies began to push them back, systematically destroying Ravager positions. Theron visited the front lines in person. He walked through the trenches where human soldiers were positioned, watching them work and fight. He saw them treat the wounded, both human and Varath, with equal care. He watched them share their food rations with hungry Varath civilians. He understood, finally, what kind of people humans were. A human soldier recognized Theron and saluted. The soldier was maybe 23 years old, with a scar running down his left arm from a Ravager burn. His name was Thomas, and he had lost his entire squad 2 weeks earlier. "Counselor," Thomas said, "we are going to win this war. General Ross and General Chun have figured out how to fight them. We are going to push them back." Theron looked at this young soldier and asked, "Does it matter to you that the Varath did not help humanity when we needed help? Does it matter to you that we treated your sacrifice with disrespect?" Thomas was quiet for a moment. "It matters that you were wrong," he said finally. "It matters that you forgot what Captain Brooks did for your people. But we came anyway, because we are not like that. We do not forget. We do not turn away from people in danger. That is who we are, and no amount of disrespect can change that." Theron had nothing to say to this young soldier. He turned and walked back toward the command center, his mind churning with the weight of truth. The humans had come to save the Varath, not because they expected to be rewarded, not because they believed the Varath valued their sacrifice, but because they valued themselves. They valued their own principles enough to die for them. That was the true power of humanity. It was not their weapons or their tactics or their ingenuity. It was their ability to hold on to their values, even when the galaxy treated those values as worthless. It was their refusal to become what the galaxy wanted them to be. It was their commitment to being better than the people who had wronged them. The final assault on the Ravager forces began 3 months later. 70,000 soldiers, mostly Vareth, but with significant human contingents, pushed against the last Ravager strongholds. The battle lasted for 2 weeks. Thousands died every single day. But the Ravagers were finally broken as the last Ravager ships fled toward deep space. The soldiers stood among the ruins and realized that they had won. The Galactic Council was saved. Billions of lives had been preserved. And humanity had paid a price that nobody in the Vareth government would ever fully understand. William Hayes sat on the crumbling wall of a Ravager fortress, watching the Ravager fleet disappear into the darkness of space. He was alive. He had survived. But half of the humans who came to fight were not so fortunate. 13,000 human soldiers had died in the war. They had given their lives so that the Vareth could live. And the Vareth would remember it. Darren had promised him. They would remember what humans had sacrificed. They would treat humanity with the respect that was due. The war was over. Everything had changed. Every favor is etched in human memory, and their revenge reshapes. Worlds Part 5. What humans remember the memorial on Axis. Prime was carved from black stone that had been brought from the deepest mines of the Vareth homeworld. It stretched across an entire plaza, 300 meters long and 50 meters high. Names were engraved into the stone. 13,000 human names. 13,000 humans who had died saving the Vareth collective. Counselor Theron stood before the memorial alone, reading the names. William Hayes, Margaret Ross, Thomas Chun, Victoria Chun, Commander James Elliott. So many names. So many lives. The stone seemed to pulse with the weight of all that loss. A human woman approached, her military uniform marking her as a decorated officer. Her name was Captain Sarah Mitchell, and she had come to Axis Prime as the military liaison between Earth and the Vareth government. She had fought in the war herself, commanded 300 soldiers, and had brought 299 of them home. Counselor, Sarah said quietly, we have begun the memorial ceremonies. The Vareth leadership is gathering in the plaza. Theron nodded. This was going to be difficult. He had to face the soldiers he had sent home, the families of those who had not come home, and the knowledge that his entire civilization had nearly been destroyed because his pride had made him reject the warnings of a species he considered inferior. The ceremony lasted 6 hours. Vareth leaders spoke of honor and sacrifice. Human commanders described the bravery of their soldiers. Families of the dead stood silently, holding flowers and photographs of loved ones who would never come home. The Vareth brought gifts of money and land, trying to compensate for loss that could never be compensated. At the end of the ceremony, Secretary General Robert Cole arrived on Axis Prime. He had come personally to acknowledge the sacrifice of his people and to discuss what came next. He met with Theron in a private chamber deep in the governmental complex. The human government is grateful for the honors you have given to our fallen soldiers, Robert said carefully. But gratitude is not why we came. We did not sacrifice those people to be thanked. Theron straightened slightly. Then why did you come? Because the galaxy needed us, Robert said simply. Because we could help. Because sacrificing our people to save others is part of what makes us human. You still do not fully understand that, Counselor. You see sacrifice as a debt that must be repaid. But for humans, sacrifice is an investment in the kind of species we want to be. Theron took a long moment to consider this. The Vareth treated your people with contempt before the war. You were right to be angry. You would have been justified in refusing to help us. Yes, Robert agreed. We would have been justified. But justified and right are not the same thing. You learn that from us, whether you realize it or not. You saw humans choosing to help people who had wronged them, and you realized that there was something flawed in your own philosophy. That is the real gift we gave you, Counselor. not our military assistance, not our strategy or our sacrifice. The gift was teaching you that the galaxy is better when people choose to do what is right instead of what is convenient. 3 months later, Secretary General Cole addressed the Galactic Council in the Great Chamber at Axis Prime. Every species had sent representatives. Humans, Verith, Kethran, Valorian, and a dozen others sat together, waiting to hear what the human government had to say. Robert stood before them and spoke slowly, making sure every word was understood. 7 years ago, humanity sacrificed 2,000 people to save the Verith Collective. We received minimal recognition for that sacrifice. We learned then what many young species must eventually learn. The galaxy does not reward kindness automatically. Kindness is given without expectation of reward, or it is not truly kindness. It is a transaction. Humans are a species that remembers. We remember every kindness shown to us. We remember every betrayal. We remember every promise and every broken promise. We do not forget. And we have learned that memory can be a powerful force. When the Ravagers threatened the galaxy, we remembered what the Varth forgot. We remembered that all life has value. We remembered that sacrifice is part of what makes civilizations worthy of survival. We came to help not because we expected to be thanked, but because we knew that if we did not help, we would lose something essential about who we are. But now we ask the Galactic Council to remember something. We ask you to remember that humanity brought you back from the brink of extinction. Not because we had to, but because we chose to. We are no longer an emerging species that can be dismissed and forgotten. We are a civilization that has paid in blood to keep this galaxy alive. And we deserve to be treated as equals to every other species here. This is not a request. This is a statement of fact. The Varth Collective, the Kethran Empire, the Valorian Ascendancy, and every other civilization in this chamber will now treat humanity with the respect that is due to us. You will acknowledge our voice in the Council. You will accept our place at the table of equals. You will do this because we have earned it, and because you all know in your hearts that we are right. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Councillor Theron stood up. He moved toward the human section of the chamber, and he knelt before Secretary General Cole. For a species as ancient and proud as the Verith, this gesture was unprecedented. Theron was bowing to a human. The Varth Collective acknowledges the debt we owe to humanity, Theron said, his voice steady. We acknowledge the sacrifice you have made. We acknowledge that you are our equals. We promise that humanity will never again be dismissed or forgotten. We promise to carry the memory of your sacrifice for as long as our civilization exists. One by one, the other species representatives stood and bowed. General Carrix, representing the Kethran Empire. The ancient Valoris, representing the Valorian Ascendancy. Speaker Thel, representing the Syndicate. Each one acknowledged humanity's place in the galactic hierarchy. On a human colony orbiting a small blue star, a young soldier named Emily stood on the observation deck of a military vessel, watching the stars. She had heard the news from Axis Prime. She had heard that humanity had been recognized as equals. She had heard that the sacrifice of 13,000 soldiers had changed the galaxy forever. Emily had lost her brother in the war. He had died on a Ravager-controlled world, fighting alongside Varith soldiers. She had grieved his death, but she had been proud of what he had done. Now, standing among the stars, she understood that her brother had helped reshape the galaxy itself. The Varith government established a fund to support the families of fallen human soldiers. The Kethran Empire offered human scientists access to their research libraries. The Valorian Ascendancy invited human philosophers to join their Council of Wisdom. The galaxy was changing, slowly but inexorably, because one species had chosen to live by principles that transcended survival. 3 years after the end of the war, a statue was erected in the capital city of Earth. It showed a human soldier standing with a Varith soldier, their hands clasped together. The statue was called The Price of Memory, and it was meant to remind all humans that sacrifice was not always repaid with gratitude. But that sacrifice was worth making anyway. Secretary General Cole died 5 years after the war ended. At his funeral, thousands of humans gathered to remember the man who had sent their sons and daughters to fight for people who did not deserve them. But they also remembered what Cole had accomplished. He had reshaped humanity's position in the galaxy through sacrifice and principle. The Varith never forgot what humans had done for them. Every year, on the anniversary of the final battle against the Ravages, they held a ceremony at the Memorial Plaza. They read the names of the 13,000. They spoke about sacrifice and honor and the importance of keeping promises. And in human hearts, across all human colonies and ships and cities, the memory remained. Humans had learned that the galaxy was indifferent to kindness. Humans had learned that the only reward for sacrifice was the knowledge that you had done what was right. Humans had learned that memory was a weapon more powerful than any technology, and that if you remembered long enough and hard enough, you could reshape the entire galactic order through the pressure of your own principles. William Hayes, the sergeant who had infiltrated Ravager command centers, survived the war and returned to Earth. He spent the rest of his life telling stories about the humans who died in the broken sector, making sure that nobody would ever forget them. He became a teacher, instructing young humans about the war and its consequences. He always ended his lectures with the same sentence: remember what we did. Remember that we helped people who had wronged us. Remember that we were willing to sacrifice everything for what was right. That is what it means to be human. The galaxy had learned that humans were a species that never forgot. Humans held grudges with the intensity of dying stars. Humans remembered every kindness and every betrayal. And humans would reshape worlds to settle those debts, not through revenge, but through the relentless force of their own principles. The Varith had learned this lesson at great cost. The other species of the galaxy would never forget it. In the end, human memory proved to be more powerful than any weapon, more important than any technology, and more consequential than any military force.